All right. Well, I'm excited about this conversation. So thank you, Rishi, for starting it. you, where you kind of you sent this question and exploration, which has been one for me too, right? Around, the way we'd summarize it is when you're grounded in the three principles and the teachings of Sydney Banks, and which is really about being strongly grounded in who we are, our true nature, the nature of reality, as you kind of go into that exploration. And then, like you and I, we're coaches. And how does that grounding relate to coaching? And for me, it's about when I say coaching, and I know you and I look at it like this, it's about pure coaching, a pure coaching modality. And, we'll talk more about what that is. And so for me, there's a harmony between these two, and there's not a conflict between these two. And so that's kind of what I think is useful for us to ask about or wonder about or explore about in this conversation. So thanks for starting it and
Yeah,
instigating it.
and thanks, Dominic. This all our conversations have been extremely insightful, and I know we share this viewpoint of how we see the integration of the three principles, the teachings of Sydney Banks, and professional coaching, and not just the harmony, but when we're saying that there is a harmony, we're also implicitly saying there is a distinction.
Yeah,
The
very
three
good.
principles is itself not coaching, and coaching is not three principles. They're separate entities. So maybe we can get really clear on what these are.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great place to start. And just from a context perspective, maybe we just both make clear. You're a professional coach. You're credentialed. If you just sort of talk a bit about that part of it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Cool. So I'm an ICF credential holder, an ACC credential holder. I'm just about to get my PCC in a couple of weeks' time. I coach senior leaders in organizations, managers, CXOs, VPs, and I have a small life coaching practice, which is usually through word of mouth and referrals. So this is what I do full time, and yeah.
great. Yeah. And then you also have a very grounded understanding of the teachings of Sydney Banks, and you've had your own sort of insight experiences and those types of things too. So that's been for you for a while as well.
Yes, yes, it's been a few years and extremely deep insights into the understanding. And my coaching has really come full circle before and through that understanding and after, as I kind of developed artistry in the craft.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. Well, thanks, Rishi. And I mean, and just a reminder for people who may or may not know me too. So I'm a master certified coach through the International Coaching Federation, and I've been a professional coach credentialed for 12 years now. And then with the teachings of three principles in Sydney Banks, I've also done much training and immersion in that, and have been quite grounded in that. And then for me, it's about this harmony that I began to see early on between what pure coaching is, and then the way that it is so perfectly fitting with a strong grounding in what our understanding is through Sydney Banks and the three principles. So yeah, very good. So yeah, what I think you said something here around to maybe a starting point is this idea of there's no escaping form. So no matter how much we understand our true nature and all of that stuff, it's about not escaping form. And so when the moment we begin talking about anything and we say coaching, what we're talking about is form. And so there's something important about that, sort of the acceptance of that, or even the understanding of that.
It's very interesting when we say that in the context of the principles, because whenever we talk about the principles, we're most of the time essentially trying to point to the formless,
Yes.
right? Which is where form comes from, emerges out of. But when we talk about coaching, it's a thing in the world of form. So the principles and coaching right there at the very fundamental is a distinction, is something trying to talk about the formless with the help of words versus something already in the world of form.
Right. Yes. And I think the thing that when you look at it, so many of us who have the insights from that grounding, where we are moved, you could say everybody is actually really moved by the formless nature of who we really are, is that spiritual nature, that energy that moves us. Um, and that energy expresses through each of us via form. So it does not express into the world formlessly. It is expressing specifically through us, uniquely through us, um, in the form of us. And so that, yeah, there is already, that kind of a relationship, um, between the truth of that potential and then its expression in the world.
Yeah, it looks like two sides of the same coin, the formless and the form. It's always in a state of creation, in a state of transition, and more expression into form. And there is no denying form. There's no deny. Even to deny form, we have to be in the world of form. Right? So there's no way we can say let's ignore the form and look at just the formless. Although
Yes.
that has its own benefits, there's a great value to the insights into the formless. But when we are engaging in this world as individuals, as coaches, as professionals, we're exclusively dealing in form. Right? That's
Yeah.
that's what we're offering.
Yes. Yes. So when you think about, from our coach training and, that part of, there's many ways you can do coaching in terms of, there is a form that coaching takes. And then what's powerful that I think you and I have both seen is when you, are grounded in a true nature, in a seeing insight into, our true nature and the, truth of, the nature of reality, then it it informs the way you coach, and it begins to alter the way that you coach. Um, and I would say the form of coaching remains. It does not destroy that form, it empowers that form. So I think there's something about that. That's kind of what's happened for me, is that the stronger grounding has expressed through the form that is coaching in a way that I am much more impactful. I have more, influence and impact that my coaching is able to achieve in support of my clients.
I love it when you said it informs the coaching, because it literally brings coaching, it brings itself into form through this modality called coaching. Right?
Yes.
And it has to bring itself into form through something or the other. And coaching is one of the many ways it can do that, many ways we can facilitate it. Right? But we need to get clear on what we're doing if we want to facilitate it properly.
We, that's a good point, right? In anything, in form, it's about distinction. And if you don't have the distinction, if there is not the clarity of the distinction, you are ineffective in form. Um, there, because there's when you think about it, in the world of three principles, there's conversations around teaching three principles. There's conversations around I'm a practitioner. That people will talk about I'm a practitioner. People will talk about I'm a facilitator of three principles. So already there's some sorts of attempt at description of what various people are doing when they are um, speaking or expressing about three principles. And as coaches, um, we are coaching, and that's sort of what we're offering the world is we are coaching. And the grounding that we have is in this place, which informs and affects the coaching. Yes.
It's wonderful when you say that three principles practitioner versus coaches who are grounded in three principles, because what we mean by the three principles is entirely different in my mind in both of those scenarios.
Hmm.
When we're saying we're coaching from a grounding in the three principles, we're saying we understand something about the nature of reality as expressed in the principles, and what we're doing is coaching. When we're saying we're a three principles practitioner, that assumes that the three principles is a way of doing something. It has become an approach rather than an understanding, in my mind
Hmm.
at least,
Hmm.
very subtly.
Well, this is good because I think directionally, what happens is if I hire a three principles practitioner or I attend something offered by a three principles practitioner, my expectation is that we will talk about the three principles and we will talk about the understanding that Sydney Banks had. And I want to further my own understanding of that teaching and of the truth as expressed by that. And same with a 3P teacher, same with a 3P facilitator. My expectation, if that's what is being offered, is that that is what the conversation will be about.
Yeah. And you are expecting to learn and increase your own understanding of the insights that Sydney Banks had. That's the outcome that you're looking for. When you're hiring a coach, that's not what you're hiring a coach for. You want to make progress in the world of form. Right? You want to make a difference in your life, not just intellectually, not just have an insight, but change something in your world, in your reality. So the yeah,
Well, that, I mean, you and I have clients that are mostly not from the three principles community.
yeah,
So I I I don't even, for the longest time, any client that hires me would have no idea what that even is, right? So they're hiring me as a coach, and so that hiring and working with me is certainly not in their perspective, in their view, to learn anything about the
yeah,
modalities or whatever, or
yeah,
the
yeah.
grounding that I have. Yeah.
My clients do not know what the three principles are if they're listening to this conversation. They've
Yes.
worked with me for months and they have no idea what it is, but it's present underneath.
Yes. Yeah.
So and I find value in that because the understanding has to impact life. That's when the understanding is useful and their life is impacted, and they don't need to know the terminology and the definitions and all of that jargon because it's embodied in them through our work. I think that's of more value, and that's what people who hire me want out of our work together. Is an
Mm.
embodied way of being and doing and having in the world, rather than anything that that's conceptual.
Right. And part of the reason we've immersed ourselves, like you and I as coaches have immersed ourselves in there, is because we saw that the impact from a coaching perspective for anyone wanting to be more effective in the world if they understand and they can see in the direction of true nature and the nature of reality, they will be more effective in the world. So now, how do we have such a conversation when, someone is hiring us to talk about, increasing sales or achieving something, or, you know, uh, again, in the world of form, and we can, from our understanding, support them in that way. Now, this is to me where pure coaching is a fantastic modality and form, which for me is a great way to express, this understanding.
Absolutely, because when we're inherent in the definition of coaching is as a process, coaching is helping the person learn rather than teaching them.
Yes, that's huge. Yeah.
Right. And that makes all the difference, because what we want is this formless energy to flow into form through them, not through me or you as coaches.
And, so there you started right now to distinguish what is pure coaching. And what is pure coaching is not, people look for definitions, but there's not a definition of what pure coaching is. The ICF has a definition, but that's just used. It's like there, and I can never remember it anyway. Something about some
Yeah.
sort of a conversation, right? But what's valuable is not the definition of coaching, but the distinction that is coaching. What is the distinction that is coaching? You just brought up a very important distinction that is coaching. And part of what happens in coaching that is distinct is people learn rather than we teach them. So whatever we're doing, whatever this interaction, this kind of conversation is, that part of what happens is people are learning, but rather than what we're doing in this conversation is teaching them. And so that's an important distinction that starts to suggest, well, what is it? What's the form of this conversation? How's this even different than anything else that I could be doing? Right. So there. Oh, and then the other part you said that I think is so important. Look at that one simple statement and how much in harmony that would be with a grounding in the understanding. Because when you know from a grounding that the person in front of you has innate wisdom, they are the potential and possibility of the universe, they have access to infinite intelligence. When you understand that that's who you're talking to, how would it ever make sense to teach them anything? Because to give them stuff from outside, which is the stuff that you know, that you have learned, and to give it to them would not make any sense. If you were truly grounded from a three principles perspective, then what you would become is more interested in what they know and what else they can see. So rather than teaching them, there is a skill, a conversational modality we call coaching, which evokes from within the other what they already know that they may not have access to. This is for me why I am so fascinated with coaching, the art of coaching, the craft of coaching. I see it as so harmonious with a strong grounding in our true nature. It's like, why would I ever want to deal with someone other than in this way?
Absolutely. It doesn't make any sense to give them my understanding of how things work, when my understanding of how things work tells me that their understanding of how things work works
Yes.
for them better.
Yes. Yes. Right. So here's the thing. Why would you do that? And this is from my experience with teaching and training around coaching, right? As I've been doing that, because I do that a lot with leaders,
Mhm.
where I support them to become better and better coaches and all that. right? So why would you, when you're dealing with, if you're a leader dealing with an employee, is you would start to tell them what to do and how to approach it and all that stuff. And really, why you do that is because you are unskilled in any other way of doing it. It's you don't know of a different way. It's like it's the same with your children or with someone. It's like, well, why would you lecture them about this? It's simply an unskillful way, in I'm saying, in being able to support them to grow and to learn. And so there's it's kind of like that's your own limit, because from a conversational perspective, that is the conversations you are used to. That is the conversations people have had with you. So coaching is this very unique, interesting, almost unnatural conversation. It takes all kinds of I don't know what it is, self-management or something, to shut up long enough to help to listen more to the other person. And it's like it can feel unnatural as you're doing it.
Absolutely. I love the way you said that. Like, it is unnatural in the way we are conditioned to operate in the world,
Yes.
but the way we are conditioned to operate in the world has an assumption. It says the outcome is I want this person to understand, learn, and grow, but I assume that me telling them is going to do that. There is a confusion between telling and having an insight. That there's, I do not see
Right.
a causal
Right.
correlation between those two.
That's very good. Yeah. So our normal conversations in the world are in fact outside in conversations that we grew up with that says, well, for people to grow, you've got to add things and you've got to, right? So here we are, we now understand the principles. We've got to start adding this to as many people as possible, right? Like,
Yeah.
so we go about teaching them this thing that we've learned and add it in from the outside, versus what the potential is with coaching is that we start to have a conversation that evokes from them what is true. Because here's the thing, if we are grounded in the principles, what we have going for us is a knowing that this is true. So if this is true, now the only question is how skillful am I in this conversation to support the other to see what's true, right? And if I'm not very skillful, do you know what the best I could do is? I'll tell them what's true. That's kind of the best I can do, right? If I'm more skillful, and this is where coaching moves, is there are other ways of having a conversation besides telling or teaching them what's true. Or even offering metaphors, or although that's much better, but there's a path, a whole path along the way here. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're getting clear and clear on how coaching is a distinction in itself that enables learning and that enables insight, which is not through telling. But maybe we can talk a little more about what that looks like, because especially with people who are grounded in the three principles, there's this huge urge to tell because it's made such a difference in their life. Right? And I've had my share of several months where I was like, I just wish everybody knew about the three principles, and I wouldn't shut up about it. And then I realized nobody cared, because that's just my wisdom. I'm just going on and on about what I think is needed for them, rather than
Yes.
listening for what they think is needed for them in that moment.
That point right there, that one simple point right there, gives us a distinction in coaching. That so first of all, a couple of things we could say is, there is a distinction called a coaching conversation, and it is distinct from a different kind of conversation. If that were not true, right? So if that were not true, then you could not tell whether someone was having a coaching conversation or any other one, right? So oftentimes when I'm training around that, I'll say to managers, I'll say, I'll do a demonstration. I'll demonstrate a coaching conversation, and then I'll later, as I'll pick it apart, I'll say, um, that was distinct. That's distinct from a casual conversation. So I'm going to point out elements within this coaching conversation that cause it to be distinct from a casual chat that you would have with a friend. So you could have a casual chat with a friend, and it can, by the way, it can be a very impactful conversation for you. It can really move you. You can really have insights, all of that. And that is not coaching. Right? So there's something distinct in what coaching is that distinguishes it from a casual conversation. Also, there's something distinct in what coaching is that distinguishes it from a teaching conversation. It distinguishes it from a consulting conversation where I, as an expert, will advise you on what you should do next. A coaching conversation is distinct from that. A coaching conversation is distinct from therapy. It is distinct from counseling. And so these distinctions are important in order for you to have any effectiveness or facility or impact as a coach. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I see as very relevant to the three principles grounded coaches is the distinction between consulting and coaching, because often we might go into this, oh, I am the expert at human beings, I know how human beings work
Yeah.
because I understand the three principles, so now let me go and coach them, but let me just be the expert, which is consulting in a way, right? And then teach them because I don't know any other way to do that job, right? By telling them what I think they need to hear. And notice, by telling them what I think they need to hear, the arrogance in that, the ego in that.
Right. So there's a piece in pure coaching. One of the distinctions of the conversation is that the conversation is always led by the client. The conversation is always on the client's agenda. It is not the coach's agenda. The focus of the conversation and the direction the conversation goes is always moved by the client in the direction the client goes. So right away, if you come into a conversation like that with any idea to go this way or that way, you will already start to breach what this form that is coaching is. Now, notice how harmonious that is with the three principles. Because in the three principles, if you are having a conversation with someone who you know has their own innate wisdom, and from your understanding of the principles, you understand you will be present in the moment, then why would you have a direction in mind? Why would you have a place to go in this conversation? Why would you be leading them to an understanding of their true nature and the nature of reality? How would you know to do that unless you come into this from not a place of presence with them, but with an agenda? And that right away is a breach to a coaching principle.
That's very profound and very, very important, because a coaching conversation, one of the biggest things that distinguishes it in my mind is another human being showing up completely on the client's agenda, which almost never, if not very rarely, happens in real life. And
That's right.
continuously being in conversation and co-creation with the client about what the client's agenda is throughout the length of that conversation.
Yes.
And to me, that also brings in an ethical side to the equation, because the moment there is an agenda for the coach, be it in according to the coach what is in the best interest of the client, there's still the client, because the client is there to get some clarity or make a decision or take an action. And that, I'm using the word contamination, right? The coach is contaminating that. the direction in which the client is going or ending up, which to my mind is a clear breach of ethics there in how we,
and
yeah.
this is where I say it's pure harmony with the three principles, because if you are grounded truly there, then you also would be present and listening, rather than than any sort of movement in a direction, any sort of place to go, and especially with another person who has their own wisdom. So you are informed by your own wisdom, but this is why I'm saying you're informed and you are expressing through the form of coaching. Now, and by the way, this is important, I think, for everyone to figure out for themselves. There's a reason I am a coach. It's intentional. It is I said I picked that. I'm a coach, right? So I didn't become a therapist. I am not a counselor. I'm certainly not a consultant. I was one at one time and I'm not, right? So notice this is intentionally I'm a coach. And I'm not wanting to be a teacher or facilitator of something, right? Like, so if that's a direction and a choice, then understanding the artistry of that, the um, the mastery of what that form is, because it is a form. We cannot say that you can do whatever you want, be, because you because you yeah, there's a million reasons, but you do whatever you want, then they become casual conversations. They become free ranging conversations. Um, yeah.
There's something very funny in what you said. Coaching is a form, right? And they claim that, oh, it's just made up. Coaching is just made up. The definition is made up. Of course, it's made up. Everything in form is made up. Doesn't mean we deny the form.
Right.
It's made up just like everything else is. Doesn't devalue it.
It and the idea of saying dismiss the form because what's important is presence, right? So presence for sure is primary, but there is no dismissing of the form in especially when you look at something like coaching as a profession. And you know, the sports analogies are very good, because if you're going to play football, right, you will be following with a lot of rigor those rules. Now, if you're not very good at it, if you're like junior, you're going to have that filling your mind. Oh, this rule and that rule, and I can't move here and I can't move there and I can't do this with the right. But after a while, that fades into the background, right? And then what becomes important, if you're going to really, really, really be good at this, is pure presence. At that point, there's pure presence. You get on the field, you be present, and you express through the form, which is the sport that you've chosen. But you never breach the rules of the form.
I have a very recent example, the supervision call that I was in earlier on, and somebody asked towards the end, hey, why did you ask for the action items? Is it an ICF thing? And I was like, well, yes and no, it is an ICF thing, but I did not ask it because it's an ICF thing. It just makes sense to do that.
Mm, right,
That's
right.
presence informing me to ask what actions are emerging out of this conversation, because I'm curious to know, hey, we had this whole conversation, you brought in a challenge, what are you going to do about it now that you've seen things differently?
Yes, 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 yes. See, that's the true understanding of our conversation grounded you in the formless. There's a deeper that you see in the formless. And this is one of the distinctions that coaching does. What coaching, pure coaching, does is it says we're not just about insights. People are not paying for insights, a bunch of insights, right? When companies hire you to coach their executives, they don't want a bunch of insights going on. They want more than that. And so part of what coaching is doing, and so you just had an insight, you were grounded now from you can see something there in the formless, right? And you begin to use some questions to bring attention to how what you just saw now, how does that express into form? What do you see now is different as you look back into form? And now you look at, going back to work, you look at going back to that project. What are you seeing differently now from this place? So this is where we're coaching has a way of including that. And again, it becomes a distinction where it's there are elements that are essential to the conversation. Otherwise, it's not coaching. Just like if you're playing football, if there are certain things not in place, you are not playing football. I don't know what you're doing. You seem to be having a lot of fun out there, which is really great. I applaud you for it, but you are not playing football. Right? So good for you. Good for you. But that was not football that I just watched, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Same with coaching.
Yeah. And there's this response, and I'd love to hear what's coming up for you is, but it's you who's saying that's football and this is not football. Right? You're the
True.
one excluding that what I'm playing can't be football because you've defined it a certain way. You've made up the rules. And what would you say to
Yes.
that?
Well, this is where, code of ethics and that kind of thing comes in. So professional coaching is part of, what the ICF has done is to put some more form and shared understanding. This what we're talking about is consensus reality here. We're not talking about reality like the truth, right? And football is not reality like the truth. It is simply consensus reality. So this is what mostly everyone has agreed to, and that's how you know that that game is played. And coaching is similar. And part of, it's an unregulated profession, but more and more and more, there is more understanding of this distinction that is coaching. Companies are wanting to hire coaches to coach their executives. And this is where the ethics come in because they think they know what they're hiring. So they think that they're hiring a coach. But when you get someone who doesn't know what coaching is, and then they come in and they teach an understanding or they teach insights that have impacted their lives, this could be very different than what the company thought that they were getting. And so that's where some of this becomes essential.
Yeah, contractual ethics is what I'm hearing. And really getting, I think putting more form to the distinction is also a way of communicating and exchanging coaching as a professional service. I think it's essential to do that.
Yeah, say a little bit more about that.
So yeah, here imagine this. I've had this huge enlightenment experience. I've really understood who I really am and how the world works and how everybody works in the world. And I'm going to come and tell you about it. Yeah, that's going to be a great inspirational speech, but
There you
that's
go.
not going to yeah, that's not going to help me overcome this particular challenge in the world of form that I'm facing.
And you know what? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But here's the question: what were you hired for? What did the company hire you to do with that leader, right? And so, do they know explicitly that what you're going to do is a motivational speech? And do they know explicitly that what you're going to do with the leader is speak about a spiritual understanding, right? So this becomes the part about the ethics in coaching, right? So if you're working with someone or they pay you, um, what is it? What's in that agreement? Now I can see us doing a part two on this. I think we'll need to close it here. It's a great start at this. There's more that can be explored in this conversation, but yeah, I'm gonna have to run to my My coaching
Right.
client is next. And thanks for such short notice, being willing to jump in and have this conversation.
I loved it, Dominic, and we should explore a part two. Definitely, there's more to talk about this. We'll do
Great.
that sometime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you again, Rishi. All right.
See ya.